I'm David King with The Collaborative, and I'm here today with Patrick White, who is director extraordinaire in the region, actor, teacher, author, columnist, and I mean, we're here to talk about your most recent production.
Yes.
But I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of stuff.
Great. Yes, absolutely. We're having a hard time thinking of something, and we can go anywhere.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you're working on now.
Sure.
I know it's I've been seeing a lot of good reviews and for the previews,
Yep.
but what's it been like getting this together?
Yeah, it's opening tonight. It's called Ben Butler. It's by Richard Strand. It's a fairly new play, 2014. It's Capital Region premiere. It's a Civil War Major General who is a friend of Lincoln's. He's plucked from his law profession in Massachusetts, and he's given command of Fort Monroe in Virginia. Virginia secedes from the Union. Secedes from the United States the day before the play starts, and he's in a fort in Virginia, and 3 runaway slaves make it to the fort, and he has to decide whether he abides by the Fugitive Slave Act and turns them over to the Confederacy, or if he finds some other way. And that's the play, and it's a comedy. Yeah.
So how did you decide this was something you wanted to produce, and what's it been like putting it together?
Right. I saw it. It was done at Barrington Stage 2 summers ago.
Okay.
It was very funny. It hits all these buttons. You're laughing hysterically. It's a piece of American history that I had never heard of, and it's there is a vital component to it dealing with slavery and with how this general deals with it that I had never known. So it spoke to me civically, and it also deals with the times we're living in right now. So, it was a terrific, engaging, thrilling night of theater, and I was like, yes, please. And it's a great part for my partner, Chris Foster. So
yeah, I've seen him in uniform.
Win-win. Yeah, I get to direct him. So.
And I mean, there's a lot of this month, particularly a lot of very poignant theater going on that speaks to our times, and does pluck from history and things like that.
Yeah.
And we were talking to John Remy from Black Theater Troupe, but
go see it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's so interesting to think about these plays that are being done that pluck from history, these moments that I think a lot of us just have no idea about, or a lot of people weren't told.
Right.
And to discover history in that way, I think is really exciting. To think like this is a way for you to find out more about America and the very personal struggles that people had to go through.
Yeah.
But it's so odd that we don't hear more about these stories that have actual real. Poignant.
Well, perhaps, yes. Perhaps we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't forget so much. The Niceties by Eleanor Burgess, which was what Remy was here, and Frost Nixon is taking place at Schenectady Civic Players, both Capital Region premieres. But I mean, it's history, but you're going for an evening out, and it's a good time, and you're in a room with 150 other people enjoying yourself and learning about where we were, who we are, and where we are at right now. So
the Niceties was particularly striking to me because it's almost painful in that it's so current. It's set in 2016, and it's a professor and a student arguing over the thesis that we didn't have a second revolution because we had slavery, so the lower class white people were not inclined to fight for more because they already had free labor in some ways. And I guess what's really poignant is this teacher trying to get or student trying to get across to this teacher what it's like being black in America, and what the establishment hasn't taken in or learned or taken to heart, and that people aren't willing to explore the suffering of others or imagine themselves in someone else's skin because they're so busy trying to deal with their own their own mess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's taking place at Siena College.
Yep.
Which I'm sure those issues are going on.
Yeah, I mean,
on campus right now.
It was very recently that they had a big thing with an alt-right student who was trying to book a lot of outrageous.
There was a post on Facebook yesterday, a friend of mine, an actor, and they said, my teacher at one of the schools said, Thomas Jefferson's an amazing president. And they just wanted to say, hey, hold up.
Yeah.
And I was like, you have to go see this play. This is in this play.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that people aren't able to. I mean, you want to reference things like this and be broad strokes. George Washington is an amazing person, but that does sort of not share the complexities of the situation and the way it impacts.
I did a show with Remy in June, the most spectacularly lamentable trial of Ms. Martha Washington.
Yeah.
And her holding on to her slaves until the end. Who knew?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people did know, but it was new, it was material to me that I had not come across and, told in this great, fevered dream of a nightmare of a play by Ehan James.
I actually, I had this interesting conversation. I was actually telling Katie, who was off camera, that about the conversation I had with my wife and I had with my daughter, who's 6, last week for Martin Luther King Day, and explaining to her that our relationship would technically be illegal if the things he had fought for hadn't come to pass. And my daughter was suddenly very troubled at the idea that there would be a law that was unjust. And she's like, I'm glad that's over with, and I'm glad that I'm alive now. And like, well, you have your own things to contend with.
Right.
We'll save that for later. But it got me to thinking about when I learned these sort of tidbits that make you question exactly how just this society is and the methods to learn it. And if it was more of a part of our culture, which I think it is growing to be, I think I would have been in a much better place. But, I think I very early on got a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me because I wanted to doubt my teacher. That was just but
throw a roadblock into the lesson.
Yeah. It was a very appealing title. But yeah, I mean, to have it be more part of the culture, we might not be where we are today.
Well, as this impeachment trial goes on, all we heard from Davos was cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security, food stamps. It was like, you're not going to back down here? You're not going to be quiet? You're not going to... No, we're going to double down. We have 53 senators supporting me, so I'm just...
Yeah, I mean, if impeachment goes... if this impeachment went through, if this trial goes through with no results,
which
he's going to feel completely validated. Yeah,
and it has no signs of that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's getting real.
So one of the things I wanted to discuss with you is and you had mentioned to me was Katie Cusack's recent story about Toni Morrison's play Dreaming Emmett, which was a really interesting. It certainly it was very exciting in the newsroom here to explore the story, and it started with Richard Loveridge sort of sharing these archival photos that he had found of Joe Scott. Yeah, and it sort of allowed Katie to piece back, and sort of go through some of these things that were missing or had been sort of forgotten about. But it's amazing to me, in some ways, the narrative that was constructed around it by local folks who had their own interests for one way or the other. But because she wasn't interested in it, that construct was allowed to be built because she had bigger and better things to do. But I think had she been more interested, that story might not exist, and it might not exactly be true. The idea that she was this sort of neophyte to theater, and the play failed because it was, I don't know, she didn't know what she was doing, or it was too raw and real, or which could be, I'm sure played into it. But it seems like there was the fact that there was this black woman who was a bit of a genius and who wasn't going to be messed with, trying to get people to to make a play that her vision and not something else.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's amazing to sort of see what struck me, I think, also is the way that the Capital Region knows every possible thing it can know about any celebrity that has any connection with the area. But we didn't really know this. So, what did you think? What was your...
Yeah, well, it was 95, right?
86.
Oh, 86.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was in the city. My parents were subscribers to Cap Rep, and I vaguely remember hearing about it, and I knew Toni Morrison's name, but I didn't see it, and... reading the article, it was just fascinating to me that all the people she spoke to, Eileen and Paul Grandal, and Eileen Schuyler and Paul Grandal, and then Bruce Bouchard, and the stories that came out of the production, and I could see, this thing like going off the rails somewhat, and the actor, that was a wonderful interview.
Yeah, I was amazed that, and he was
Phillips.
I believe so. He went on to the Cosby Show. But he was deeply interested in reconnecting with this.
Yeah,
It obviously meant
it.
Yeah, it meant something to him, and he's been in contact since. But
sure. I mean, Toni Morrison.
Yeah, exactly.
If I had done a play, I did one day a reading with William Kennedy, and I was in the building, Proctor's, and they were doing Next Act Now, and I filled in for Aidan Quinn, who just showed up for the reading, or the day of the reading.
Gotcha.
He did a one-day rehearsal with them for the reading of The Light on Colony Street, I think it is. But I was talking to Maggie Mancinelli Cahill, the artistic director of Cap Rep and the director of the reading, and I overheard that they needed someone to read to fill in. I was like, I'll do it. Yeah. So but to work with William Kennedy and just be in the room with him and his words, I'm sure it meant. I will tell that story like I just did, for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I loved how she brought up novelists, in the history of novelists. And I was thinking of all these novelists that have tried playwriting, and I'm like, there must have been one that succeeded.
Yeah.
And,
I had the same thought. It was,
I was going through them, and Norman Mailer, Don DeLillo, E.L. Doctorow, Stephen King, and I was like, there's got to be one. And it occurred to me, Charles Dickens,
Yep.
used to take used to tour his books, and maybe that in the, pre-cinema age, it was more common. But I was thinking to myself, because when I write, I know I'm grammatically I'm tenuous, but I always read my columns out loud before I submit them. And I don't know, if a novelist, because all of their work is done alone, that they're not used to collaborating, or whether they're just not used to the spoken word, whether their relationship with the written word is different.
Yeah. I immediately, obviously, part of this story, exploring the story, was challenging some of the assumptions that were put out there. And there were a lot of things that you have to sort of question, like, did she really destroy all the scripts, which is part of it? Did she, do a novelist really not ever, like you said, never have, can they never successfully transition? And, what struck me when, at first it was like, okay, I accepted that, but learning more about what went on, and that she had this history, Katie talked to this professor at Howard, that was her alma mater, and she explained, that no, Toni Morrison did have a long sort of history in theater, maybe not like a super deep one, but she definitely worked at Howard on theater, and this was before Beloved blew up, so it wasn't exactly like I'm too good for this. I mean, obviously she was celebrated and whatnot, but I think there might have been a lot of culture clash that really prevented it from taking hold, because she had a deep vision. She was also strongly, obviously, critical and aware of race relations, and wanted to assert herself and things like that. And meanwhile, Albany is Albany, and there were people who weren't probably happy about the idea that I think Bruce sort of says that that he felt a little intimidated, if not worse, by the fact that she was uncompromising and wanted her vision to come across. And I'm sure in some respects she was protecting herself and her moral stance about the black experience, in the same way that we discussed that with the niceties. And it's this failure to connect. Like, no, I'm not saying you're the enemy, that you particularly are the enemy, but I am standing up for black people and the history in this country by standing up for my vision,
Right.
So that complexity really struck me. And obviously I wasn't in the room, but I feel like we did get a lot more insight into the many obstacles this faced. And the one thing, I forget his name, but the actor who went on to the Cosby Show.
I think it's Joe Phillips.
Yeah.
Because I read the name. I know I have a friend who's also an actor,
Okay.
Joe Phillips, and I was like, he was in that? No, that's not him. And it's another Joe Phillips.
But,
I think that's it.
It's so clear how haunted he was by it, and that participating in it and even some of the exercises were just so powerful. And Morrison didn't stop at just sort of bringing back Emmett for this thing. It was challenging Emmett himself. It had a woman saying, why were you looking at a white woman? A black woman saying, why were you looking at a white woman? Right. I mean, really provocative and really, challenging comfort. I'm sure, even a black audience, like a pure black audience, would probably be challenged. And that's not what you're getting in Albany.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and then since then, I've heard from a number of people in theater who were like, I want to see the script and I want to perform it. Yeah. And I feel like it might have a better chance nowadays because of how, powerful it is, but who knows? And we don't know how our state feels about it. So.
Yeah. Isn't there a copy at the Writers Institute?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
But they aren't clear on why.
We have a copy.
Yes.
We just can't show it to you.
Yes.
Yes.
I've heard some people have made some calls, though. So I don't know. We'll see.
Cool.
But anyway, yeah.
Great stuff.
But so your columns lately, one of the things that I've heard a lot about lately from people in theater is the idea that theater, and I guess this is a cliche in some ways, but to hear the stories from so many people about the idea of theater giving you a home and a way to explore things that you might not otherwise. In your columns, your latest was about sort of your favorite play. Or
the play that changed my life?
Yes.
Yeah. Glass Menagerie?
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting, I think, for artists to be able to share, creatives to be able to share that sort of those touchstone moments, because I think it informs a lot about the deeper motivations. So could you talk a little bit about that, about Glass Menagerie? And I guess secondly,
sure.
Do you ever find yourself talking to other actors, writers about the works that really shape them? It's something that I've been sort of fascinated with lately.
Yeah. I actually opened that up, and I grafted on that story about Glass Menagerie. Has it's part of me.
Yeah.
But I read a book called The Play That Changed My Life, and it talked to a bunch of playwrights and other creatives, and I did a poll, at one point asking a lot of people about the play that changed their life, and it's great. Great stories. It's really interesting to hear where people come from and what influenced them and things like that. And it's a lot of fun. But the Glass Menagerie, I was out of it in high school, whatever, in the, Breakfast Club, trying to find the niche or whatever, and drifting through all of these different personas, and I'd left the soccer team and didn't know, and I was having problems with my parents and the communication, whatever, and I loved speaking in class. I went through years of speech therapy when I was young, and I think once I found it, I was like, ha I'm going to use this. So so it was, we were reading out loud, I think 10th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, The Glass Menagerie, and we read it for 3 days straight, and no one else wanted to read it, and I put my hand up, and I read Tom for 3 days, and it just I was getting laughs, I was able to express this anger I had towards my parents. I can feel it right now, that the way in which this script gave me an outlet for what I was feeling and who I was. And it just like struck this major chord in me. And afterwards, people congratulated me and told me, how much it meant, and I was like, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was pretty much, and Tennessee Williams has done it for me, for the rest of my life. Every summer I go to the Provincetown Tennessee Williams Festival and take in, 9, 10 plays. And, I've directed Glass Menagerie, and suddenly last summer I've read a number of biographies, and I just grab it.
My family has always, my grandparents since the 70s, not that I was alive in the 70s, but I almost, they owned a house. My family still does on the Cape, and so we always travel up to Provincetown, and we've seen various shows there from time to time.
Yeah,
and it's one of my favorite places.
Yeah, and he spent a couple of summers there. Had his first love there, and Brando auditioned for Streetcar there. Have you ever heard that story?
A little, like briefly. Yeah, I haven't heard the whole.
Yeah, it's a good one. He was up there, and he had just finished Streetcar, and he had mailed it off to his agent, and they were going to audition this guy, and Brando hitchhiked from New York City to Provincetown, and because he wanted to save the money, and he got there, and Williams' house was completely dark. They had lost power, or none of the lights would work, and the faucet was leaking or whatever. And Brando came in, fixed the pipes, put a new fuse in, and then read the part. And they were like, "We have him. That's Stanley." And that's how we got the part.
Wow. Well, so we're also we've been talking about film a little bit off camera.
Yeah.
And our episode of Micah Khan a few weeks ago has ruffled some feathers, but my understanding is that you sort of do feel the same way about some of the things, some of the films we were talking about, and how they represent the Oscar choices. I mean, I haven't seen the entire nominee, but the three you speak to are the three that we've been talking about a lot.
I have not seen 1917. I'm a big fan of Sam Mendes, theater director. But Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and The Joker, I kind of felt were like ordeals to get through. I really can't see them getting 31 nominations between the three of them. And I'm just like, especially now, especially today, in this time that we're living in, the Oscars, people say, well, you have to reward quality. And I'm like, there's quality all over the place, and the Oscars were invented as a selling tool for the studios. The studios invented the Oscars, right? It wasn't to reward quality. It was to sell, tickets. Yep. All right. So it's a sales tool, right? And we're going to reward quality, okay? So if we look at all these, if competitive awards for works of art, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
We can all agree that you can't compare one to the other. It's just ridiculous. So if it's nonsense, can't we get better at the nonsense? Can't we spread it around and be more diverse and, more inclusive? And, it's just like looking at, the 4 films with 1917 that got 41 nominations. It's just, and especially The Joker, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They are such aggrieved male victim, white male, victim-y, self-pitying, and it just reminds me of Trump.
Oh, well, it's funny. I mean, because on paper, if you had told me there would be a Tarantino flick about the Manson murders, technically,
right,
a Scorsese-esque Joker movie, and an actual Scorsese film about very, very mob minutia, 10 years ago, I would have been like, those are my favorite movies. Well, I wouldn't even question it. And then watching them, and I was excited for Once Upon a Time, even though I felt Tarantino's last, I don't know, 4 have been, well, 3, whatever it is. I thought The Hateful Eight was god-awful. I thought Django was a mess. It had some redeeming qualities, but overall it was terrible. But still, I wanted a Tarantino movie to be good. And I read a lot about the Manson murders and the CIA and all the, all the crazy stuff that was happening, and LSD and all that stuff at the time, and how it intermingles with Hollywood. And I'd been listening to a bunch of podcasts about it at the time as well that were very detailed. And I was just amazed about how he turned it on its head. And his fantasy was to kill the hippies and especially do all this violence on women. And then some of the most casual stuff in it, like Brad Pitt shooting his wife.
What is that about?
It just struck me as this guy
it's like a throwaway.
Yeah.
And it's to burnish Pitt.
Yep.
It's to make him look like a
badass.
dude.
Yeah. I just couldn't believe it. I at the end, I was like, I heard him loud and clear, and I wish I hadn't.
Mystifying.
Yeah, and I thought Joker was just a hollow piece of nonsense that put a great actor, good actor, in the most sort of like empty shell of a performance, and then was afraid, it's the system, and it says over and over again, it's the system that's failed you, and then everyone loves him because he's violent, and then at the end they even cop out of that because he's having a fantasy at the end, and it felt like the most commercial piece of, it was prepackaged to get an Oscar for a superhero movie.
My advice to Arthur, is that the character's name? Is to attend comedy shows, is to be a good audience member, is to go and support other comics and learn from them and be open and take notes and become teachable, Arthur. If you love comedy, go to a comedy show and, tip your waitress and buy your drinks, go for the 2-drink minimum and learn from others and take notes and become teachable and practice your craft.
Well, and here's the thing. If I hadn't heard the interviews with the director or read some of the interviews, I might have been a little more open to it. But he's literally saying, I'm directing this film to take on people who have killed comedy, and because they're too offended by everything. But this is a guy who directed the Hangover movies. This is
I'm sorry. I don't know how much more time I want to spend on this, but all right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Did you see films? Did you see anything this year that you think?
Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah.
I was shocked and amazed. Having grown up listening to all of it. Pretty much, she was in the car playing on our car rides to church or whatever. I've listened to her all my life, and I was still like watching this, like dumbfounded at the myriad different ways in which her career moved and how it affected and who it, who she was, and then that final scene when she sings with her cousins or nephews, or tries, she sings, but just heart-wrenching. What other films?
I saw Judy last week.
Yeah, what'd you think?
I thought it was honestly the best music bio I've seen in, definitely. I liked it better than I liked Rocket Man or the Queen one.
The Queen one.
It felt a lot more personal, and it was more concise, but you got to know the person and their struggle a little bit more than.
I think a lot of that was Renee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the script was nothing compared to her performance.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Powerful. Yeah. And Rocket Man, I wanted to like. It was an improvement on. The Queen biopic, but it turned into like these MTV, production numbers.
Yep.
Yep.
That's exactly how I felt about it. We're getting further away from the character than because of the production. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's go back to theater.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's your? I know you have a busy schedule coming up.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're going to be at Bridge Street. this year?
Yeah. Bridge Street is. I'm doing another show at Curtain Call. Ben Butler is at Curtain Call, and then in first week of April, I'm opening an Act of God at Curtain Call, and that is based on the writings of the Tweets of God. Yeah, and then Bridge Street, I'm doing Maytag Virgin by Audrey Cephaly. Yeah, it's new to me too. There was a production out west, I believe, and there's a production right now in Lowell, Massachusetts, a fantastic theater, Merrimack Theater. But Bridge Street is doing the Capital Region premiere at the end of April. And it's a two-hander, a widow and widower on their back porches in Alabama.
What's your pitch to folks in the Capital Region who might not have been to Bridge Street Theater yet?
Oh my gosh, I've been the two guys, Stephen Patterson and John Sowell. They've been producing together for 20, 30 years. They're married to each other, and they did a production of The Mound Builders 8 years ago, down at Stageworks Hudson. I've been going to their stuff ever since. They have a really idiosyncratic and passionate and honest, heartfelt, emotional connection to the material that they produce, and I respond very strongly to what they're doing. They're inclusive, they're supportive, they do a ton of premieres. Last year, they did this show about gun violence, which was just beautiful. It was about the daughter, and it was based on a true story. It was about a daughter of a college professor who doesn't get tenure, and she shoots up a faculty meeting. But it was all focused on the daughter and the family and the daughter's relationships and getting her first job and her boyfriend and her relations with her father. And it was just so beautiful and touching. And Times Union named it one of his favorite theater pieces this year, and it was one of mine.
Yeah.
But it was called Better. It was a beautiful piece. But they do new, original stuff. They do stuff from the 70s, which I respond very strongly to. Frankie and Johnny and the Claire de Lune by Terrence McNally, and The Effect of Gamma Ray on Man in the Moon Marigolds. They love Lamford Wilson. I've auditioned for them a number of times. The last time was Redwood Curtain, which was about a homeless guy out in the Redwoods and his possibly Vietnamese daughter. And so, yeah, I auditioned for them a lot, but now I'm directing for them.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what else? I mean, I know you see a lot.
Yeah.
So what else should people be thinking about in the next few months? What's on your radar that you really want to see?
Oh, I got a list because I've been in rehearsal. I've been kind of slow going in the new year. So yeah, I'm going up to Stupid Effing Bird up at Hubbard Hall. Kirk Jackson's directing that, I believe, and Kim Stauffer is in it. The Albany professor who's appeared a number of times at Cap Rep. That's huge. Frost Nixon, it's Schenectady Civic Players, seeing that next week. The Man in the Brown Suit, iTheater Saratoga, is a new adaptation of an Agatha Christie. Not such a big fan on the Christie, but I haven't seen an iTheater Saratoga in a while, so I want to get that done. And a good friend of mine, Beth Pietrangelo's in it. She's a fantastic actress, so I'm very excited about that. And, Fiddler on the Roof, coming to Proctor's. I'm really excited about this. I've seen Fiddler a number of times. It's a tough one because it's long.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the revival that Bartlett Sher directed on Broadway, and it's my 15-year-old nephew's favorite show. So I'm going with my nephew, and he just had his stage debut this past spring in Thoroughly Modern Millie, and he's playing the lead this year at Ravina Queeman Selkirk High School. He's playing the Kevin Bacon part in Footloose. So I'm very excited.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm the biggest proud gunkle.
So let's just, for Ben Butler, just dates.
Yeah, sure. It opens tonight, January 24th through February 8th. It's at Curtain Call Theater, www.curtaincalltheater.com, and 518-877-7529.
Whoa, I'm impressed. Yeah.
Yeah. And next weekend, it's got 5 shows. There's a Saturday matinee. It runs Thursday through Sunday with a Saturday matinee additionally. So that's great. Yeah. There you have it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
David,
and
thank you.
Everyone should go see Ben Butler and also read your latest column in our next issue, which will be out early next month, with the Toni Morrison story on the cover. But your column on the Glass Menagerie is there, and so I hope people think about theater a lot this month.
Yeah. Thanks so much for supporting Capital Region Theater.
Oh no, thank you. I never hear local theater mentioned without your name and that you were in attendance. So,
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.